Hey folks, this is Curtis Brown, instructor for Emergency Preparedness and Homeland Security 302. I just want to go over the weekly course assignment both from last week and this week. As you know, this is week 6 on your syllabus. You have the information for that. And I also want to look ahead to the midterm and the grading schedule for the next couple of weeks. So, as it relates first to week 5, last week, most of you have turned in your executive memo. You turned them in on time. They were due on Saturday at 6 p.m. My goal for grading those executive memos is to do that over the course of the next upcoming 2 weeks. So the 2 weeks that you have for your final exam and then spring break. And so hopefully you'll get that grade. You'll see the posted grade on Blackboard, and I'll provide some more information on the grading matrix. The grading matrix will be consistent with the information I provided, both in terms of format and answering the question. From the brief glance I gave the executive memos, many of you all look like you did a lot of good work. You referenced the reading and you made a compelling case and a good executive memo. So I hope that's the case for all of them. But again, the goal will be to post those grades over the next 2 weeks and have them ready for you after you return from spring break or after spring break is over. In terms of week 5, you had a reading assignment from the textbook. It was related to mitigation. And then you had a video. It's a TED Talk from disaster response to disaster prevention. As we know, mitigation is the ability to reduce risk, to understand and see a threat, and figure out how can we lessen the impact of this threat. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, provides funding and resources for state and local governments to develop mitigation programs that helps to lessen the impact in terms of a disaster resulting in injuries and deaths and critical infrastructure damages. Many of these programs occur post-disaster, and a part of the funding that FEMA provides is for state and locals to mitigate the impact of future disasters. Now, the current administrator of FEMA, Brock Long, has put a lot of emphasis on mitigation. They've recently come out with a study that said every dollar invested in mitigation saves $6 in the future. So the concept is if you plan ahead and look ahead and do that now, you can save a lot more money in the future. So mitigation funds are usually tied to reducing the impact of flooding. And as we all know, our biggest threat in terms of cost and damage impact in the United States and globally is the impacts of flooding. So in many cases, FEMA provides grant funding through these mitigation grants for state and locals to actually buy the property of homes that have been impacted through repetitive flooding. That is homes that constantly flood, even during like heavy rainstorms. We are in a state here in Virginia that have certain parts of the state that have been utilizing mitigation funds for many years to elevate homes, buy property, put in dams and other things to prevent repetitive flooding. As you know, Hampton Roads, Virginia, including Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Chesapeake, Portsmouth, is an area that is in many cases below sea level and deals with repetitive flooding. They also deal with the threat of sea level rise, which we'll discuss a little bit more in the weeks ahead, looking at future threats. But mitigation, again, is, how can we reduce the risk and draw down the risk that we know exist. So this is a area of planning that in many cases requires leadership because these are investments that don't appear to be immediate, and so it really requires political leadership. It provides it requires funding because you get a lot of times there's a choice: do I pay for it now, or do I pay for it in the future? Unfortunately, a lot of political leaders and emergency managers delay the cost of mitigation and end up costing a lot more in the future. So, as it relates to planning, this is a core part of emergency management. Based on the infrastructure, the landscape, the geography, what areas of our city or local government or state are most at risk of which disasters. And if we understand that information, we can then move forward and plan and use finite funding to draw down those risks. And so this chapter talks about some of the grant programs that FEMA offers to allow states and locals to retrofit. On page, what page is this? Page 89. It talks about the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, which is the largest source of funding for state and local mitigation activities. And the bullet points show what you can use that funding for: acquisition of property, retrofitting structures, elevation of structures, building code enforcement, localized flood control, public education and awareness. And so understanding that program, what you can do, and again, this is an element of planning because it's uniquely different than preparedness. That's one thing you need to understand: the difference between preparedness and mitigation. Mitigation is the really related to lessening the risk and the threat, whereas preparedness is understanding and developing your plans and being prepared to respond. They are closely associated, but they are different. In the TED Talk that was a part of last week's reading, really talked about changing our mindset related to disaster prevention. Essentially, investing the funding, the mental energy into mitigation instead of being late until after a disaster has occurred. We're in a very unique time now. I think last year was a good example. Here in the United States, we had several major hurricanes that caused billions of dollars of damage in 3 different parts of the country: the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, Texas, Florida. And so it really pushes us to say, if this is our new normal, what can we do to enhance our mitigation and draw down the risk? And so that's a good video by Rachel Kite, and really talking about moving from just the sole focus on response to prevention. And I believe that the reading and that video complemented your executive memo, which was due, because the executive memo was regarding what will be the impact of a 25% decrease in funding for an emergency management program. And for any of you all who connected the potential impact of lessening the ability for the Emergency Management Office to mitigate the threat of future storms, I'm sure you did very well in terms of making a good case for that. So again, I look forward to reading those executive memos. For this week, the focus is solely on planning, and actually, what does planning look like? Within the field of emergency management, CPG 101 is the main resource that state and locals use as a guide for planning. CPG, Comprehensive Planning Guide 101. And it actually shows you what a plan looks like it has a template. So again, that promotes the whole concept, of incident command system, national incident management system. It shows some commonalities of planning that exist no matter wherever you go in the country. And so the goal of this week's reading is to understand the different components of planning, in particular an emergency operation plan, which is the main plan that every state and local use to show how they are set up, what different entities or departments in the organization will do or are responsible for, and really is a type of planning that all of you all should learn how to do in terms of setting up that plan. The planning process is collaborative, which the CPG discusses. It's not just the emergency management office. They have to pull together all their stakeholders within inside their organization, because if you follow the emergency support function model, each of those departments and agencies have a role to play. As an example of the use of CPG 101, you are to look at the Commonwealth Emergency Operation Plan. And that goes into the discussion question for the week, to make an assessment of the Emergency Operation Plan for the Commonwealth of Virginia and see if it meets the standards of CPG 101, and then briefly discuss if it has any threats that are missing that are not discussed in depth. And so we'll probably come back to planning after spring break. I might adjust the syllabus just a little bit because I want to make sure you get this core concept. Again, this class is called Emergency Planning and Incident Response. So I want to make sure you definitely understand the concepts of emergency operation planning and what is in an emergency operation plan. How do you initiate the planning process and make sure that the core features of an EOP is in a plan, and also how to assess the plan. So many of you all probably have posted your discussion board questions. I did provide an extra day. They are due today, February 22nd at 6 p.m. And you should have your 2 responses to your classmates by Saturday at 6 p.m. I will follow up soon with more information about the midterm exam. My plan is, I'm calling it midterm exam week, but for the first half of the week, it will just be studying. So I will probably release a study guide, give you some information on what you should review in preparation for the final exam, and then release the final exam midweek and provide 2 to 3 days for the open book exam. The exam will include multiple choice, true, false, short answer, and there will be a memo component to the midterm exam. So multiple choice, true, false, short answer, and a memo. So again, I'll give more information on that within the coming days, and you'll probably have from Sunday to Tuesday or Wednesday to study, and then I'll post the exam. You'll have access to it, and you can take the exam. The midterm week is followed by spring break. If I make any adjustments to the syllabus, I'll let you know ahead of time, just in case you want to do some reading over the spring break. Okay, folks, well, thanks a lot. I look forward to reading your discussion board questions. Feel free to email if you have any questions, and have a good rest of the week. Thank you.